Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we're back for part two of the discussion of the offense in that AFC Championship game lost to the Chiefs. And here again is Frazier Tafar. Frazier, how you doing?
Doing good, Ken. Glad to be back for the second part of the show and break down some of these individual matchups we have.
Always a lot of fun, and one of the reasons I like having you on for the offense, Frazier, is you're an ex-guard yourself, and it's always a good opportunity to talk offensive line play. So maybe we start with that in terms of this in this second show.
Yep. And I think we can start with some of the allowed pressures we had. We had 1.17.
So what that means is 1.17 is a half plus 2/3. So it's not some sort of made up number. It's 1 1/6 in total. But since I fractionally apportion these things, it can end up with a weird decimal place in terms of what it looks like.
Got it. So 4 pressure allowed, 1.5 and 2/3 quick hits, and
1 1/3 sacks.
1 1/3 sacks, and then 41 pass plays and 32% aggregate pass pressure rate.
Yeah, so the 32% is what we talked about earlier. 13 times they pressured him. Of course, they also gave him ample time and space on a very high percentage of the throws. So 44% in this game. You take that every game. You generally will win with it. And I don't think in any way that the offensive line can be blamed for what happened. In a lot of cases, we talked about this in the first case, when there was odd man pressure or extra man pressure, it was timed up quite well. They came through places where they gave the Ravens dilemmas instead of decisions to make about how they do things. They couldn't block everybody in a lot of cases. Sometimes it was because they rushed 6 and they only kept 5 in, but other cases it was times where they rushed 5 and there were 5 blockers, but they weren't positioned properly to make any kind of stunt handoff to get the extra rusher covered.
Yep, just well played by the Chiefs. I think they had a really good scheme for this offensive line and what the Ravens bring. So with that being said, what did you think about Stanley's performance?
You know, I thought he finished off the game really solidly from my perspective. We went through it, and the first thing comes up is he got beat, quote unquote, by Omenahu for the strip sack. In truth, you know, I looked at it, I timed it out, and I've talked about this before, but you could do it with your DVR if you have a DirecTV DVR or any DVR. If you hit pause and then you hit fast forward, you generally will go ahead one click or one frame at a time. And the game was broadcast on CBS. That's 1080i. That's broadcast in normal HD instead of the 720p that you get on CBS. On NBC, for example. And on 1080i, it's 30 frames per second. So you can actually try this trick yourself sometime. Just be taping a game normally. Pause it, start going fast forward, wait for 1 second to click off the clock. So you got to do it when the clock's running. Then go 30 more clicks, and you'll see that's exactly where the next second clicks off the clock. And all of a sudden you'll have a great, when I figured that out for the first time, I was very excited about it because I knew I was going to be able to time things accurate to 3/100ths of a second in football, and that's very useful. So anyway, getting back to the Omenahu strip sack. Stanley held up on his block for about 3.5 seconds, certainly over 3, and the pressure was still not there quite in 3.7 seconds. It gets a little dicey after that, and then he got the ball knocked loose. It was from behind. You know, when I say that, it's probably 8 o'clock in the pocket if Lamar is facing 12, and it was the kind of strip sack. First of all, difficult to prevent, but also one where Lamar had an opportunity to move up. Had he thought to do it, had he used his clock. One of the unusual things about the play is that Stanley normally mirrors exceptionally well. You've heard me say that many times, interposes himself between the pass rusher and the quarterback extremely well. So if there is pressure, it's often a case of it's the bull rush that the defender needs to resort to. And that's much more, the quarterback can do a lot more than that. It's with that. It's frustrating. You know, the quarterback never wants to end up with his feet tangled up with the left tackle, or worse, the left tackle pushed directly into his butt. But he could do something about that. Whereas once the defender, the Omenahu or any defensive end for that matter, gets his hand on the quarterback, that's usually a very bad situation because injuries can happen, strip sacks can happen, sacks are much more likely. Just bad things can happen, and that's been something Stanley's whole career has been very good at avoiding. This is a play where Omenahu, who is a powerful and bendy player, got by him on the outside, and just it was what it was.
Yeah, I've been at an unfortunate time, but it didn't really cost the Ravens because they ended up getting the 4th down stop anyway. So it was okay in that sense.
Can't keep relying on your defense, though, can you?
We cannot do that. We got to win an offense one of these days. But back to the mirroring, I think this was probably Ronnie Stanley's best game mirroring. I think he had a couple, not highlight, but you can really tell like he was getting in a groove in the sense of not giving up any ground and being in front of the pass rusher.
He was a lot healthier, I thought, looked more flexible. He didn't really have the opportunity to get out in space this way that he had in previous games. He made some great blocks against the Texans. I'm definitely thinking against the Dolphins too, but he's been making some great blocks down the stretch out in space in front of plays. When I think it was against the Texans, because the Texans bit completely inside on the read option, where not even a read option, on a play action boot, where Lamar booted left and Stanley got in front of it. It's something where you really love to see the old Stanley at work on that. And one of the other things Stanley does very well in the open field is line people up. And to see him be able to do that with his current injury and lugging around that brace and whatnot, very, very effective and very good to see. A little more detail in the game. 1 pressure, 1 half a quarterback hit. Those were his only negative events in this game. Lamar also did run him out of 1 pressure. I took away his adjustment for that. 2 missed blocks, 1 loss at the line of scrimmage. That's not bad at all for a whole game to have, 1 loss at the line of scrimmage plus 2 others that resulted in negative events. 1 block in level 2, 1 pancake, made his only pull, no highlight. B+ for the game. Over these last 4 weeks, I think I've flipped the outcome of what I want for Stanley in 2024. And I wonder if you're in the same place. If you were thinking 4 weeks ago, maybe they're probably gonna have to bite the bullet, lose $8 million, draft a left tackle in round 1, and move forward without Ronnie.
Yeah, and I'm thinking I'm definitely changing my tone on that. I think you've mentioned it on the podcast a couple of times. This could be definitely a 1-year process. Being able to get as much value as Ronnie we can this year. It seems like he's on an uptrend from his recent injury history, and at least being able to play this out and have a development plan in place for a left tackle in the future, and also featuring the rotation going into next year, that could be an aid into not wearing him out and maximizing his use.
Yeah, they could certainly do that.
Not like they want to do that.
Yeah, they don't want to do that. And they want to do what they did in this game, was basically he starts the game and he never goes, except he had to leave the field for 2 plays in this game, which, obviously it didn't have a big impact on his own playability. He was fine in the second half. But it might have been something with his brace that came undone. I remember Joe Flacco once had to leave because when it was limping off the field, I was like, oh, what's going on? But it was just he had to have his brace replaced.
Yeah. And I was there for that game too. That was funny. Yeah. I was actually freaking out. I thought he injured it again.
Yeah, me too. So let's see what else we got. So anyway, I'm thinking 2-year plan on Ronnie Stanley, meaning he's here for 24 and he's probably released prior to 25.
Right.
And it just does allow them to bridge into some additional draft capital, but I don't think they get away from drafting a guy who can play left tackle in this draft. I think it could be in the 1st or the 2nd round that they do it, but I don't think it can be any later than that. If they want to get a truly high ceiling left tackle, I think they've got to draft him in the first 2 rounds, and you might get a very green guy in round 2, and in round 1 you probably also get a green guy. You probably get more of a traits and minimal experience at the position kind of guy. Kelechi Osemele, a guy in the past they got in round 2. Michael Orr is the kind of guy you might end up, if you get an experienced left tackle in the first round late, that might be what you end up with. That's not what the Ravens want.
Yeah, I think the main thing we're going to be looking for is someone who has had experience at left tackle their whole life and not looking for athletic freak like we did with Falele. Looking for someone who has sound technique and be able to be that anchor for Lamar. Ronnie fit that mold at the time. Someone from Notre Dame, sound technique, maybe not the strongest guy, but being able to mirror effectively and be a pro and efficient at what he's good at. And I think that's what we're going to be looking at moving forward for this draft.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think they probably are going to have to make a choice. The guy you're talking about goes at the top of the first round. A guy who's played for his whole life at left tackle. He's Joe Alt, at Notre Dame he's going to go in the top 10 picks, maybe in the top 8 picks. He's going to go very early. There isn't a guy without warts by pick number 30 who's left. So he's either had some trouble in college playing left tackle, or he's had some issues with learning the game recently, or he's got some other negative quality that other people don't want to take a chance on. And, short arms would be one, or he doesn't quite have the build they expect, or, any number of things. But you're going to end up with somebody who's got warts on him. Number 6 overall, you get Ronnie Stanley. Number 30 overall, you get somebody else. 3rd
round pick, you get Orlando Brown.
Yeah, well, that would be great if they could figure out where other people are missing that badly. But anyway, that would solve one of the tackle problems anyway.
Yep. So with that, what did you think about Simpson's game?
Yeah, this was not good. Simpson had his 7th consecutive game at the D level. One thing I'll say is he's been remarkably consistent. Cannot remember ever seeing this before, where a guy got 7 consecutive games in the D range. And at first last week, I had him as an F plus. He basically was at the very top point, 1 point short of scoring. And then I noticed I'd actually made an error on my sheet and underscored him by 2 points. And all of a sudden he's in the D range. Wow. That makes sense. So, but I say we 7 consecutive and 8 out of 9. He's been in the D range. 1 pressure, 2/3 of a quarterback hit in this game. And he had another holding penalty. And here's another element of John Simpson consistency for you. John Simpson in his career in Las Vegas had 1 penalty every 95.4 snaps. Okay. And if you look at him, it's a whole bunch of holding calls, couple personal fouls, and a couple false starts. John Simpson, in his Ravens career, remember 95.4 at Las Vegas, has had 1 penalty every 95.5 snaps.
Insane.
Incredible. Absolutely incredible. And it's been the same mix of penalties. I'll actually bring this up now because it's worth kind of figuring out what they have. So you go to team.
What's the sample size for both?
1,622 snaps, I believe, with okay, I'll get you the number exactly. I believe it was 1,622. And in terms, I have scored snaps here. Well, let's use the PFF snaps because they're going to be the same on both sides. So if we look up John Simpson here and bring him up, okay, got to go to offense and the right year. So he's had, that's all. That's his pass blocking stats. Go one more time. Okay, 1,242 snaps this year with 13 penalties, and he's had 1,622 snaps with 17 penalties prior to this year. So it's not even that much different in terms of he's about 4/3 as much playing time as he had this year in his previous career combined.
Okay, so right on average, actually.
Yeah. Wow. Occasionally you see something that's just freakily like level in statistics, and this is one of them in terms of John Simpson. I think this is what the Ravens hoped would not happen. Is I'm sure they thought we can reduce his penalties, and to give you an idea of how significant it'd be, if they could have cut his penalties in half, which is probably too much of an expectation, he lost 63 points in penalties this year. If instead he'd lost 31.5, okay, I'm going to do this here, 885. Oops. plus, and I divide that by 1176. He would have been up from instead of a 0.75 for the year, which is not particularly good at guard. He would have been up to 0.78. Probably would have been at the upper end of the C. Probably would have been like a C plus season.
Wow.
And as it was, it really was about a D plus season for him. He's never had an F the entire year. It's just been 7 straight games and 8 out of 9 in the D range that have basically defined his season. So it's not like he's not trying. I don't believe that even for a second. It's just the coaching for whatever reason is not taking in terms of figuring out how to have the guy avoid holding penalties. And the ones that occur on pass blocking plays, I'm not even sure there's a lot they can do coaching wise because he's really getting beat on those plays. The ones that were very frustrating is on run plays when he gets a holding call because he lets the guy get outside the frame and he's still holding on to him in the way that we normally think of holding penalties typically accruing.
Yeah, and he was getting manhandled by Chris Jones, and it was evident. He got the one holding call on him. It was. I'm not too sure. Go ahead.
I just wondered if I thought it was on Wharton. No, it was on Jones. You're right.
Yep, he went right through on him, and that caused Lamar to throw the ball away quick and have the incompletion. So I don't know. Obviously, he's not going to come back next year unless you think otherwise.
I actually think he might be back for depth, and let's kind of examine this scenario. And we want to do this with a few players in the second show because it's part of what we got to be thinking towards right now is how's the Ravens guard situation going to look? I don't, if they tag Matabike as I expect, I think by the time they get back to being even in position to make him an offer, I think he's already off the market. I think somebody else will sign him by then. And that's probably true of Queen, of Stone, of a lot of the guys who there's no, honestly, there's no realistic way they can bring back Patrick Queen.
Unless the market just says no.
Unless the market just says no?
Yep.
Well, the market could say no, and the market could still say yes at, okay, let's pick a number that the market's definitely going to say, 12 million. Okay, they might say no to 18 million.
Yeah.
But they're still going to say somebody is going to pull the trigger at 12 million. And
the
Ravens
say no at 12?
The Ravens wouldn't do that.
At 12 million?
No. I don't see that as a practical solution. He's a good player, but the issue is that you're just spending too much money at inside linebacker at that point, and you got to be careful with every dollar you spend at that point. So, if the choice honestly is Queen at 12 million or Matabike at 17 or 18 million,
I'd take Matabike.
Yeah, I'd take Matabike. And I think it's a pretty easy choice. And the other thing is the Ravens have been very adept at platooning at that position. And I think they have some of the personnel on hand right now.
Simpson.
They have Simpson on hand, certainly. And they use draft capital on him, but also to play dime when if they want to use somebody different on a high leverage snap, get a safety in there. Could even be Hamilton. In terms of that role. So anyway, I with Simpson, I think getting back to him, I think he could be back. I think if he does come back, he's pretty close to the vet minimum. If he does, I don't think he's a guy that is going to excite the rest of the league. Offensive line is in short supply, so maybe someone gives him a 2-year deal for $4 million, and they're looking for him to come in and provide some solid depth for them too. Not out of the question. I think the Ravens will be judicious about the dollars they spend on him, but it wouldn't surprise me if they wanted him back for depth.
That's fair.
Yeah,
I think more so. I'm tired of the patchwork at offensive line. I really want to figure out the answer because I don't know if I said this on the show before. Lamar doesn't need weapons. He needs a wall in front of him. If you give Lamar a wall, we saw what happened in 2019. I think we had Seth Roberts, Miles Boykin, and Willie Snead as receivers. I think that's self-evident in the way that Lamar is able to carry the team on his own. And if you can give him ample time and space, the opportunity to read the field and make decisions and get out if he needs to, that's where your offense flourishes at. Not spending all this money at the skill position. That you need to build the team from the inside out.
What it took in terms of the other positions, in terms of having all pro players actually, I guess Orlando Brown, I'm not actually sure if he was all pro that year, but I think he went to the Pro Bowl.
Yeah.
And Stanley and Yanda, of course, at that point still playing at a very high level. That's an awful lot to ask for in terms of having that good line. But you're right in the sense that Lamar may do with very average receivers. And I think this was something that I kind of latched onto, and in retrospect and seeing the way the Ravens offense has worked with better receivers, I think it's fair to say that you're taking a big chance if you completely bank on your offensive line to do the job for you. And when they did again in 21, they had an injury to Stanley, and Alejandro Villanueva was not the answer. And whoever they played at right tackle, which was a whole bunch of different players, didn't work out either.
Right.
Then it really becomes a pretty much of a mess. So it's kind of like, depending on your 3-down weak side linebacker, if you're really depending on that guy to play every down as a huge functional component of your defense, and you're paying a lot of money to do it, you're taking a big risk. Because if that guy gets hurt, then you lose a lot of cap expenditure. In the case of Queen, you lose a lot of draft capital expenditure too. Yep. And you don't get a good return on that. So anyway, it wouldn't surprise me if he's back. But I understand your desire. I mean, to me, not having a patchwork offensive line means having a fairly continuous offensive line. And, with all the things that happened to the Ravens and some of the stuff with Stanley and the fact that they were rotating at tackle some, I would say continuity was one of the big strengths of this line. I mean, they played together most of the time all year. They knew who was going to be at those spots, even when it was some rotational play. And the three guys in the middle basically played almost every single snap. Zeitler missed 2 games, but they played most of the snaps.
Yeah, the front part of the line was definitely the most prepared of the group going in. I think Linderbaum is definitely someone who I think can go down as one of the Ravens' greatest centers of all time, next to Matt Burke. I think he's definitely one of those guys. His size can matter, but it really doesn't matter for him. I think another year with Linderbaum developing, getting into the gym, being able to work with Lamar and have his technique just take to another level is going to be crucial for him.
Let's move on to Tyler, because obviously I had a great pass blocking season, which is something, I said this a couple of times on the show, but people just don't get it if you don't understand how much Tyler Linderbaum improved from year 1 to year 2. It's one of the most significant improvements on the entire team, along with Stevens, in terms of a player who just surprised massively on the upside. And maybe to some people, I wasn't surprised. I knew it all along. Well, he wasn't that good last year is what the real problem was. And PFF, with their weird weighting of pass and run blocking, made everybody think he was. So it didn't really make a lot of sense. But anyway, I had another solid game here. 1 pressure, run out of another one by Lamar, which caused him to lose his adjustment on the game. 3 missed blocks, 1 loss at the line of scrimmage. Not a good mobility game for him. That was a function of what the Ravens were doing. They weren't running the football, so you don't get a lot of opportunities to make level 2 blocks when you're not running the football. Can happen on a screen pass, but mostly it wasn't happening. 0 level 2 blocks, 2 out of 2 on pulls, 1 pancake, no highlights. B for the game. Finishes off a solid season. He is ahead. He was ahead after 1 year in terms of where you'd hope he'd be starting off as an NFL center who's undersized. And he's way ahead after 2 years in terms of where you expect him to be. So very positive in each of the, with each of the relative performances of this year. And I think there's still growth for him. Because his growth was so massive as a pass blocker from year 1 to year 2, I think it is possible he's going to need to consolidate those gains. So it may be that Linderbaum is just as good as he was this year, another year. Now, most people, they don't really look at offensive line play all that closely, and they're going to see Linderbaum probably make a Pro Bowl again next year, and they're going to think, well, he's a Pro Bowl before, he's a Pro Bowl after. When's he going to make All-Pro? The truth of the matter is he's going to need to consolidate the gains he made this year, which means he's got to probably play even a little bit better, probably against a few more bigger men this next year, make sure that some of the Ravens' problems at guard that are certain to be happening, because there will be growing pains from having new guys at guard, whether it's whatever combination you pick out of Simpson, Cleveland, and Voorhees are playing guard for the Ravens next year, it will create pressure on Tyler Linderbaum to need to be better than he was this last year to have the same kind of outcomes that he had. So I hope people aren't expecting the moon from him next year. I think he probably will improve with still maybe allowing a few more pressures than he did this year.
And another big step that he took this year is his leadership. And it's evident when you listen into a broadcast and you hear him chirping at the line, picking out calls and stuff like that. I'm going to be keying in on that next year, continuing to see that growth. And him and Lamar literally talking at the line of scrimmage before the play, making sure we're on the same page and never having miscommunication. I think that's where he can continue to grow his game. And with the technical aspect continuing to grow his football acumen, it only makes him a better player because he can work harder. What is it?
Smarter.
Work smarter, not harder. Exactly.
And you know what? You are exactly on the money with that, because if you look, if the Ravens without Kevin Zeitler, who is the North Star, the snap caller, all of the things he does with that, and he doesn't call it the protections, but he initiates the cadence with the tap on the thigh when they're having to run silent and whatnot. I don't see another way other than Linderbaum taking a pretty great leap forward and being the general line, the line general that he needs to be, for the Ravens line to have nearly as good a year as they did this year. Even if Voorhees, shows all of the things we expect him to be, and Ben Cleveland all of a sudden breaks out in year 4, and he looked pretty terrific at the end of this year when he got playing time. It's not impossible. He's going to go in there and be a very powerful right guard, but I think he's still going to have problems as a pass blocker. He's still going to have things that frustrate us probably, and probably have some things that make that right A gap now, where the left A gap was the one this year, be the really heavily targeted gap along the Ravens line that Linderbaum is going to have to do extra to make sure is not exploited.
And I'm confident he will. I think him and Linderbaum and Zeitler were the keys to the offensive line being successful this year. And with that being said, what did you think of how Zeitler did this game?
Yeah, I finished on a strong note. Unfortunately, this might be his last game as a Raven. It's a sad way. Zeitler also has never played the Super Bowl. I did hear after the game that he's made the Pro Bowl as Joe Thuney's replacement. Obviously, Thuney wasn't going to go to the Pro Bowl because he's going to the Super Bowl now, but Thuney was out because of the injury as well. It's a great finish to his career. He's the greatest lineman of my lifetime never to make a Pro Bowl until this year. So, it's a good story for the end of his career. Very happy for him. And this game, he went out very well. 1 pressure, 2 missed blocks, 1 loss at the line of scrimmage, 1 out of 1 on pulls, 1 block in level 2, no pancakes, 1 highlight combination block. Weren't a lot of highlights in this game, folks, because there wasn't a lot of moving to level 2 to get combinations. There weren't a number of really clean stunt pickups because there weren't that many stunts. It was mostly blitzing.
Right.
It's just there wasn't a lot of opportunity for highlights in this game. Zeitler got an A. He's been on an incredible run since London. So I think about how long ago London was and the set of games he's had over that period. Couldn't be happier for the guy. I think he'll get really paid this year. Be good for the Ravens in terms of a draft pick, but it wouldn't surprise me if he signs for 3 years and 35 to 40 million. Still, wow. He's an older guy, which is nobody wants to be caught holding the bag on the back end of that. But on the other hand, I think he's one of the surest bets to perform in 2024 of any of the Ravens free agents.
Yeah, tough to see a guy like Zeitler go. Has been a staple of the offensive line since he's gotten to the team. I think out of all the people other than him and Linderbaum that we've had I haven't had one complaint about Zeitler. So going from Yana to him was definitely a transition that was the most smooth AF, as they call it.
Yeah, great signing by EDC. Great signing. Yeah.
So with that being said, what did you think about Moses?
Yeah, another solid game out of Moses. Moses has had his games vary in a fairly small range. He's been almost all in the A through D range, with a little heavier weighted towards the A and B component. I don't get worried about that, by the way, because there is a fair amount of variation in play game to game between offensive linemen. And if I know there are people who think that shouldn't be the case somehow, but you have tons of at bats as an offensive lineman, but you still have relatively small sample sizes in individual games. And if you give up big negative plays, that ends up impacting your score. And that's the way it ought to be. So in this game, Moses was party to 2 sacks. One was full, where he's beaten outside by Karlaftis, and the other one, he was bulled by Karlaftis to phone booth the pocket on what ended up being a sack. Lamar ran him out of one other pressure, for which I dinged his adjustment. 1 level 2 block, 0 pancakes, 0 out of 2 on pulls, 1 highlight. That was very early on in the game, by the way. He had a great maintenance of push. I think it was on the Edwards 15-yard run. If you want to take a look at that, each of the players, the 2 offensive linemen, had great plays on that. Simpson had a cycle block, as Maureen and I call it, on that play. So he pulled, connected on his pull in level 2, and pancaked the guy for a highlight. That's doing all of the things we can possibly score on a single play that are positive for an offensive lineman. Okay, and Moses had 10 yards of push on Tershawn Wharton, and that was a point in the game where you think, man, this is just exactly what's supposed to happen. Moses at 330 plus pounds is pushing around Wharton, who is 290 soaking wet. Is exactly what this team needs to do against the Chiefs. And unfortunately, they just didn't keep doing it. They didn't stick with it, and that's some of the frustration that Frazier and I went at over in length in part 1. But we won't do it to you again in this second part.
I'm pretty sure that's the play him and Charlie Kohler emoted on how big of the run that was in the moment of the game. Yeah, that was, to me, that was a big run. The stadium felt like it was a big run. We ended up scoring on that drive, so it was successful, but just tough to not see that continued throughout the game. I think we've talked about this on the show. I know I've talked to you about this off air. I do think Moses is slowly showing decline. I know that he's graded well through PFF and the way you grade offensive line. The things that do make me worried about him is that in high leverage moments, he tends to get beat, and it doesn't look pretty when he gets beat. I just, I don't know. His run blocking is great, especially when we're running downhill and it's pure power. I like it when Moses is out in space and is able to get on his blocks. But when he's in a mirror and reactive situation, he has a tendency to just get it to the cone and be a non-factor after that. And I don't think that's going to be able to cut it. Stanley this game showed blocking beyond the cone in his mirroring, and that was the big key in having ample time and space. And he was doing it on his own. I think when Moses was doing it, he was getting a lot of help from Zeitler because of the 3-man rushes and with the spies and all that. So Moses is definitely going to be on the team next year. I think to what capacity he continues to keep his starting role all the way through is the question.
Okay, this is interesting. I would definitely take the counterpoint on this. Mm-hmm. And he's had 3 bad games this year. So week 1, he didn't fail. He didn't have any failing grade the whole year, that's really good for an offensive lineman, because most players do get one. We mentioned Simpson didn't have one either, though, so it's not sufficient. it's just good. So in the first week against Houston, Will Anderson took him to the woodshed a little bit. He scored a .59 raw score, which would be failing, but he had an adjustment which pulled him up into a passing grade. Then in week 15 at Jacksonville, he scored a D-, exactly the minimum passing grade. I don't think it was Josh Allen who did it to him in that game. I think it was the guy on the other side, and I'm trying to remember who that was. So I don't think it was Josh Allen anyway. But anyway, the third game he had trouble was versus Pittsburgh in week 18 when he got TJ Watt. And he had a .54 raw score, but his adjustment took him up to .62. quality of opponent is everything in some of these cases. Fraser, are you there, or do I have to add you again? Sorry. Sometimes we lose somebody for a second if they have a internet connection problem, but Fraser is back with us.
Yep.
So just talking about the 3 bad games he had, I think you probably heard that backstage were against Jacksonville, against Watt, and against Will Anderson. And he had good games against players like Zadarius Smith. Actually didn't play in the second Zadarius Smith game, a C- in the first, so I better take that back. He had A against Cincinnati, A against Houston. Sorry, A against Cincinnati, A against Indianapolis, A against Arizona, A+ against Miami. They were down some pass rushers, and then an A last week against Houston in the playoff game. So, overall, to me, he's the least of the Ravens' problems, and he's the most. The Ravens are most able to take a 2-year position on solving him. With Stanley, I don't believe you could be without a left tackle for next year, a guy who's the next left tackle. But one thing you could do is you could have the next left tackle for 2025 be your backup right tackle for 2024. He could also be a backup or even starting guard for 2024 if you want to go that way. But they better get left tackle characteristics out of that. I want a guy who truly has the feet to pass block. I don't want somebody, this guy can help as a guard or tackle or whatever. That's like basically trying to solve your starting pitcher, your starting rotation problems by picking up a bunch of relievers. When you do that, doesn't work. Yeah.
And I'm not a fan of us doing the line carousel with a bunch of guys that we're drafting. I think if we get a left tackle, I don't want him moving into right and trying to switch his footwork and all that unless it's dire situation, emergency. I think if we draft a left tackle, we need to develop him as a left tackle.
Yeah.
We cannot mess with another lineman's career at this point. We need to keep it as is.
I'm with you on that. It certainly didn't work out for Michael Orr like that. And he moved. I think basically Michael Orr looked like he could be a borderline Hall of Fame right tackle when he entered the league. And then he got in his mind that he had to play left tackle to get paid. And Orlando Brown, went through the same thing.
Yep.
Either of them could have been a borderline Hall of Fame player. But as soon as you looked at Orr's split just from his rookie year, when he's forced to play a little bit for Gaither at left tackle, he was terrible when he played there, and he's good when he played on the right side. And then his second year, there was less play, I believe, at left tackle that year. But then the third year, they came to camp. They basically wanted to move to left tackle, and they let him do it because they were pissed off at Gaither about his work ethic. Then Gaither did one truly unforgivable thing. He came up with a fake injury and claimed he couldn't play because he didn't want to play right tackle. And they sent him off to got rid of him. After that year, I think he might have spent the year on injured reserve, but he didn't play anyway. And he ended up going to San Diego and swindling them out of $24 million with four games of good play at the end of the 2012 season or 11 season, I believe. So he was pretty much a throw his own career down the toilet. He marched to the beat of a different drummer, couldn't be told what to do. He's baseball's version. If you're my age, he is baseball's version of Earl Williams, this 1970s catcher for the Orioles, who just could not get out of his own way. Had real talent, just could not get out of his own way in terms of being a complete lousy teammate at the time. And it had happened already at Maryland. It was the reason why he was available with a 5th round supplemental pick. And the problem was he was great when he's on there at left tackle. And if the Ravens hadn't screwed with him with a Michael Orr situation and just left him at left tackle, he might have been okay, or he might have been okay for a while. Or he might have been okay for a while, signed a big contract with the Ravens, and then screwed the Ravens.
Yeah,
I'm not sure how I feel about the whole thing in terms of him going.
I think he was right tackle, or was right tackle for the Super Bowl year, right?
For the Super Bowl run, he was, but that Bryant McKinney was brought in, and Bryant McKinney had all kinds of work ethic issues himself. Supposedly, he played himself back into the lineup with Harbaugh and out of Harbaugh's doghouse as the year went on. They moved McKinney in at left tackle, moved Orr to right tackle, and Kelechi Osemele at right tackle, moved to right guard, replacing Reed and Harwood. left guard. That's what I meant. Replacing Reed and Harewood, who were some players who neither had worked out, and Osemele was really the best of the three in the postseason.
Yeah, for sure. Osemele was crucial. I know Ja Reed was not the answer at left guard.
He went to Kansas City and was pretty good, but yeah. All right, let's keep going on this. I think we're done with all the players. McCary, I'll just say 2 out of 2 snaps. He'll be around in 2024. Obviously, the one thing I want to say about McCary is I want to see him stick at left tackle as the backup there. I think we're past the point where there should be any question of putting him in at a different position for any reason other than to get through a game. But there should be no attempt to make use of his versatility because he's too important as a backup left tackle right now.
Yep, and he's shown this year that he could be serviceable, and we need to keep him in a bubble wrap just in case.
Yeah. Ben Cleveland, 1 play, 1 block. He had 2 near full games, played basically 2 full games on the season. I'll give you a total number of scored snaps I had for him. But one of the things about Cleveland's game is he really scored just about as well as anybody on the team did for the whole year. So Zeitler was a .81, Linderbaum a .84, but Ben Cleveland and by the way, that's approximately equal because the guard and center have about that much differential in terms of the grade levels. But Cleveland, a .84 at guard, outplayed Zeitler on a per snap basis in fewer snaps, admittedly. He basically played about 3 full games. Some of that's as a 6th offensive lineman, so you might discount some of that value, but a fair amount of it's just at guard. And that was a heck of a run. He has basically, in my mind, earned the right to fail, meaning he should be the presumptive starter at one of the 2 guard positions next year. I don't know if that's the way it's going to work out, but again, year 4, there's a good reason why you want to have him show what he can do in year 4, because you might get a comp book in exchange, but even if you don't, hopefully you get a really good year out of the guy and he plays the best he can. I think that's pretty much what happened with John Simpson this year is they got about the best he could do.
Yeah, and I think we've all been excited to see Simpson get his opportunity as a starter, and this upcoming season could be the opportunity.
Yeah. For Cleveland, right? You're saying?
Yep, 100%. Yep.
Yeah. All right, really good. Well, let's switch topics right now. We'll go on to talk about some skill position players. You're the guest. You talk about who you'd like to talk about first, maybe that we haven't spent too much time on so far, and especially if there's a 2024 concern.
Right. Let's start with Edwards. I think disappointing to see Gus not be a vocal point in such a crucial game where the run defense of the Chiefs was not statistically good all year, and not having him in the 2024 future as of right now is tough just because he has the persona of our backfield, rough, tough, down your throat. I mean, he's going to get 3 yards falling. It's going to be hard to replace that style. Not in the sense of having a power back, but just Gus is going to be hard because he's unique in his abilities. So tough to not be able to see him go all out this game.
Very, he's been a remarkably strange career he's had. Obviously, high yards per carry all the way up through this year. He's been one of the best ones out there with 500 plus carries. He had 501 carries entering this year. Now with 198 carries, he had his biggest workload ever, had his best yardage ever, but his worst yards per attempt ever. The thing that was nice about his season, he had a really good year as a receiver. So he had 13 targets for 180 yards, which is off the charts at, almost 14 yards. Might be over 14 yards. So 180 divided by 13. But anyway, looks like 13.8 maybe yards per target as a receiver is just fantastic for a running back. And this is incredible. Now I'm looking at this on PFR. He's at 10.1 yards per target for his career now.
Wow.
That's ridiculously high for a running back. And some of the things we saw this year, the 80-yard touchdown, obviously the 80-yard pass, it wasn't even a touchdown, plays large into that number. But in all those cases, he's doing exactly what Mark Andrews tries to do on those kind of plays, which is make space for Lamar to get him the football.
Yep.
And did a great job of getting behind defenses, of getting yards after the catch. But I think a lot of it was just getting behind defenders as extended plays were breaking down. And it's a really valuable asset. It's 180 extra yards doing that in addition to the 810 he had as a rusher. It was still a great season, and he ended up being one of DeVoa's top backs in terms of success rate. A lot of the things that reduced his yards per carry were short touchdown runs, and he had 13 touchdowns this year. So you can see how that would cut into his yards per carry some, but that's okay. It didn't cut into his success rate on those plays.
Yep, and it's going to be tough to see Gus go if that is the route that happens. I will be excited to see him have opportunity to be a workhorse somewhere else, hoping that he does have the opportunity somewhere. Selfishly hoping the running back market is stingy still and he doesn't get paid, so we're able to retain him for a minimum amount of dollars. I think that would probably be the best case scenario. But
what would you want to pay him, and how you structure the contract?
Like 3 years, 4.5, maybe
4.5 total, or 4.5 average
total.
Okay,
and then with incentive close to 9.
Okay, so I was going to say 2 years and $5 million, and I'd be happy throwing incentives on top of that. I actually don't think he'll reach them, because the NLTBEs have to be more than what he did this year. So it would actually might be kind of difficult, but you could set up 2 years of incentives on that would be, that could make it worth your while, or make it worth his while. His position right now, in terms of what his statistical ledger looks like, doesn't really work out that well for him in terms of all of the running backs that are out there. Like if you see, Edwards and his yards per carry have been 5.2, 5.3, 5.0, 5.0, 4.1. If you don't understand what happened in Baltimore this year in terms of trying to run out of 11 personnel instead of the 21 and 22 schemes he's used to running for his whole career, or you don't look at the goal line situation, or you don't look at the receiving, all of those are, significant positives that you'd have to tack on to Edwards and get the other team to buy into.
Yep.
The Ravens understand that value, and they're actually, I think they're the most likely team to pay him a higher percentage of what he's actually worth. So, I don't think Dalvin Cook's going to get paid anywhere, by the way. I think he's going to have to start over from the vet minimum next year. So when you're looking about the running, it's a very tough place out there. J.K. Dobbins, another guy, I think he's going to have to start off over at the vet minimum plus incentives, probably, despite the fact he's still fairly young.
Wouldn't it be great if we get all these guys back? Just going to that camp.
I got to have him play. Do you think Dobbins has a chance to come back?
Maybe not after this playoff performance, because if he's complaining last year when we were going against Cincinnati about his workload, I can only imagine what's going to happen going into this year. So I don't know if Dobbins is going to be willing to go back to Baltimore and give it another chance. I know the Ravens probably want him, but Dobbins himself, I doubt, wants to try and have a shared backfield. He's probably going to try and go somewhere where he can be the guy.
All right. I think I think you're right on most of that. I think one thing I would say is that I think both sides might have soured on the relationship.
Okay.
So and what that would mean is, if Dobbins has done anything in terms of his rehab that is not, according to Hoyle, the way the Ravens wanted it done, then I think he's in a lot of trouble in terms of being re-signed. I think the Ravens had enough of those kind of players with what happened to Bowser. With there's plenty of other players who fall into this in the cap. We're not going to take the time to name all of them. But anyway, I think the Ravens wouldn't put up with that. If it's a case of just they think Dobbins, fits like any number of other backs was, I think the Ravens would be perfectly happy to take a chance, and they'd probably also be perfectly happy to take a chance on an undrafted back like Keaton Mitchell. And it won't be Keaton Mitchell this year. And there might not be an opportunity to have a priority UDFA who has as much of a ceiling as Mitchell had. It's very unlikely that would actually be true. But the Ravens may have, found a means to get cheap running back talent, and they have to investigate every means they have to find cheap talent position by position. And for anyone out there that wants to talk about signing this wide receiver, this running back, this linebacker, this whatever, it's easy enough to say, I'd love to have, Fred Warner playing next to Roquan Smith, and I'd like to have Jesse Bates playing next to Kyle Hamilton, and we can just release Marcus Williams to do that. And, first of all, none of that makes any sense practically. Second of all, it can't make any sense cap wise. So you have to start by trying to figure out where you are not going to spend. So start by telling me if you have this great franchise idea, and I'd love to have a series of shows on this. Tell me where you want the Ravens not to spend so that you can make this splashy move you'd like to make. All right. And I want to give up on signing Justin Madubuike because I want a new left tackle. I want to give up on paying money to at safety because I think we need to spend that money at corner. You can do any number of those things are fine, but please don't tell me how we can sign a $30 million wide receiver and just put it on the credit card. That's ridiculous. Yeah. So much of what traffic goes on Twitter is basically about the splashy big name fantasy former star wide receiver who is now between 29 and 33 years old, who has suddenly become available because maybe he spent the entire last year injured.
It's fantasy football online. I try not to listen to it. They just want to make it a big fantasy draft. So it's all good. I think the Ravens have options at running back coming up this year. And that's probably the last position of their worries. So I'm confident in the running back room moving forward.
You think they let it get through to the bargain room time, which basically would mean that they let Edwards and Dobbins go out and figure out the market value.
Yeah.
And then they try and re-sign him. And even in the case of Edwards, you wouldn't try and re-sign him ahead of time. But,
I say yes to Edwards. Let JK see what his worth is on the market. Yeah.
I kind of think JK really needs to see that. Just personally, I get that sense.
Yeah.
I also kind of feel like Patrick Queen needs to see that as well. He's going to have to understand what his market value is. And first of all, for Patrick Queen's sake, and certainly for the Ravens supplemental draft pick sake, I hope it's 110% of what he thinks it is.
For sure.
But when he says, I'm not signing for $17 million over 4 years, it should be more than that. There's some sort of Twitter exchange which related to that. I think he might not be in tune exactly with what the market is. And hopefully he is. Hopefully he is. That's all I can say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe he's not watching his own film, but he makes splash plays. He does these things here and there, but to be consistent in and out player, I don't think Patrick Queen can be the guy to bear all the weight at linebacker.
It'll could be a team that has a Mike that they already trust to run the defense.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And I don't know how many teams they have this, but is not in the Roquan class. So he's somebody who maybe got signed on a little bit of a bargain contract, or he's still on the first deal is another possibility. Pair him up with a third-year player who's already
like Chicago, right? Edmonds.
He's on the second deal, and he makes a ton of money. So I don't think he makes a lot of sense to pair up with Queen. Right. But I'm looking for somebody who's cheap for their team. So instead of spending the money at Mike, you spend the money at the trail player, and then Queen can provide you all kinds of value. And there are a lot of teams who are just stuck in terms of who they've got. And bringing in a player like Patrick Queen will help get your fan base excited about the defense again. So hopefully he finds that home, and it's the right place for him. Let's see. How about I pick a player? Ricard, I think his usage was a little bit disappointing in this game. We talked a little bit at the first show. 15 snaps was all he got. You're not running the football when you don't have Patrick Ricard on the field, generally speaking. So part of the Ravens being effective is they combine a point of attack offense with misdirection that they give you, and that is very difficult for a defense not to make a mistake and get themselves out of position on. And so by not having Patrick Ricard on the field and not having him in the backfield a lot because he played in line some as a tight end, it really means they're not committing to the run in that sense. So if there was a way, if there was a manifestation of what I didn't like about the game plan that was maybe most prominent, it was the fact that Ricard wasn't on the field to threaten the run. As much as anything, you're not threatening to be multiple if you don't have Patrick Ricard out there.
Yeah, and as we mentioned earlier in the previous podcast, it was tough not to see those back-breaking plays, like we mentioned, having off-schedule plays to Ricard and things of that nature. I mentioned the should-have-been pick that Lamar threw to begin this third quarter. Ricard was wide open, and that could have been able to get us jump-started. And I personally want to see Ricard back for as long as he's able to play at this level. I think he's a crucial part in the offense, not only in the run game, but he is a weapon in the pass game. And I don't know why we don't use it to try and unlock everyone else. Because just like when Lamar gets running with his legs and he's passing at an efficient pace, it's hard to stop him. If you can get Ricard incorporated into the pass game, how do you stop that?
Yeah, I think it creates problems for that defense. It creates things they're just not able to solve if you have him as an option out there. And you're right, it's a backbreaker when the fullback does either of the things. What he did in Seattle, he catches a 26-yard play where there's nobody close to him. Or when he catches a 5-yard play, there's nobody close to him, and he runs over two people because he gets a full head of steam. And both are great outcomes. And honestly, you throw one of those in once in a while, you completely get the defense to back off and do things differently. And unfortunately, the Ravens really never put themselves in a position to do that. And we talked a little about the 2020 Tennessee game and how that was a big turning point in the game at the beginning of the second half.
Yeah, getting those plays where they're not expecting you to, whether it either be Ricard or continuing to hit the running back in the flat, or even hitting Kohler on that same kind of chip release concept, just hitting them where they don't expect it is, I think, the key moving forward. But good.
I want to talk about Mark Andrews briefly, and we're kind of getting to the end here, but Andrews, 18 plays, 18 snaps in this game. They basically did not get out of 11 personnel much the entire game. They did a little bit of 12 with Ricard, if you want to count him as an inline tight end. And then one of the guys, Andrews, or Likely, either flexed or even in some cases in the backfield. But basically, Likely and Andrews were almost never on the field together. And so the times they were, it was like, I think the Lamar run play, they might have both been out there. Not 100% sure about that because it might have been Kolar, Likely, Edwards, Cleveland, and Ricard. Might have been those five actually that were out there on the field. But they had five tight ends as they were lined up. It was one of the most extreme formations you'll ever see, and very obvious what they were doing. But it was a game for Andrews that I think they really limited his usage, obviously, and like Humphrey, we wanted those guys back so badly. I question whether either one of them was really ready at this point. Andrews was probably more ready, but Likely was already playing better, and so it was hard to. In the case of Humphrey, they could have really used some great cornerback play, and in particular, they could have maybe used him as a slot. They could have used him as nickel when they wanted to go to a standard nickel instead of having Mollett in there, for example.
Yeah, especially on that third down play. I think that would have been the best place to put Humphrey, but that's neither here or there. I think
he wasn't available at that point. He was done for the game. He played all his snaps on the second series of the game, and then he was done.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. He actually missed the last 3 plays of the drive, I believe it was, but started that second drive, and after Darby had started the game, and then he was already done by the end of that series. So it was a long drive, 16 plays or something. He played about 13 of them.
Okay. And I mean, Darby did great all day. I didn't hear his name one time. He handled his side. It was shocking to see Stevens give up what he did on the other side, but it's okay. Andrews, it was tough not to see us play the matchup game. I mean, if you're not going to throw it to him, at least have him be a decoy. Use him as the middle eater as he is. I mean, that's where he lives and dies, is the middle of the field. If you're going to try and get your outside guys open, at least have the sense of imagery that you might throw it to this guy in the middle of the field. I don't understand
the offensive mindset and scheme going into the game at all. I don't know if they got scared out of their game plan due to the start that the Chiefs had, but whatever it wasn't effective in matching up scheme-wise and matching up personnel-wise.
Yeah. All right, Frazier, I think we're going to have to call it here. I actually looked at the mailbag. We don't really have anything that is directly related to the offense for today. And part of that is my fault because I didn't put out the usual call for those. Sometimes we get them anyway, but we didn't have to do this time. I want to tell you how much I've enjoyed talking football with you this year. It's always a pleasure to get together with you. All those weeks of the matchup show, which I think have just been really fun and good content. And I'd love to continue that with you. Hope we can have you on during the off season for any number of the regular series we do in terms of looking at two players or positional reviews or whatever it might be. But we'll talk about that off air. Tell folks for right now where they can find you online and talk football.
I appreciate you, Ken. Been a great year. I appreciate all the love and support that you've given me throughout the whole season. People can reach me at Twitter/X at F_RAVE8. That's F_Rave8.
All right. Outstanding, Frazier. Other folks out there, you know where to hit me up if you want to be on a Film Study Shorts. I'm not going to repeat that, but DMs are always open. Just hit me up. What I do want to do is thank everybody. This is the last of what I consider to be the main shows of the year, the offense and defensive reviews. And season is not ending the way we want to, but as far as an audience goes, I couldn't have a more loyal set of listeners than what you people are. I absolutely love seeing it. If you want to go out to Spotify or one of the other podcast apps and see how many total hours you listen to and send that to me, I'd love to see it. Had some people who listened to 200 hours of content this year, and I'm overwhelmed by what a commitment of time that is, and happy that you guys are so loyal to this program, and it means a lot to me. Try and if possible, if you're a proponent of this show, go out and find a new person or two who'd like to listen to it. It does make a difference to us on this end, and we'd certainly appreciate it greatly. The questions have been terrific this year. The interaction with people on Twitter has been at a very high level. Always really appreciate that. And I do want to hear from you. Always want to talk to new people about football and find that new group of people who'll be the basis of the show going forward. People come through the show often to get their start. Then they go off and do their own podcast somewhere else. And then they, move on to do other things. And sometimes you can only do this for a few years. It's not like anybody's making any money at this. So this is just a way to get started and a way to have fun talking football as somebody who really enjoys passionate football fans. So please hit me up with a DM if you'd like to be part of that. But Frazier, thanks again for being such a good friend all year.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate you.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.